So what I'm going to talk today is about, as Andrew said, talk about Gen Z and Gen Alpha and some of the emerging trends that we notice, which have implications on the communication world and how advertising needs to be done very differently. I think just before me, Alice was talking about making sure that when you're creating a marketing communication, you cover the five W's, what you say, how you say, that's important. So that's what I'm going to touch upon. And what we want you to take from this session is when you want to talk to this new generation, the Gen Twitch, as we call, a combination of Generation Z and Generation Alpha. They have some new codes, how they speak. And why are we talking about this generation? The reason we're talking about this generation is it is always the youngest generations which drive the behavioral changes in the society. Not my word, but since Andrew gave me that word, I'm going to use that. Boomers, they were the ones who drove the rock and roll movement. Gen Y were the drivers who were big on social media when it started, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And now we have this new generation, which is defining the new trends. I think my research team particularly wanted to put out two call outs on skinny jeans, knowing that's the kind of stuff I like to wear. And they say that the new generation doesn't think skinny jeans are the trend. They have gone back to baggy jeans. So besides that, that anecdote, the new generation are not only the ones who are driving change. This is also the generation which has a very significant buying power and income. Why do I say so? Firstly, just on stats, this generation, Generation Twitch, which comprises people from 10 to 25-year-old, are 2.5 billion of the 8 billion people on the planet. So what they do today and what they do in future will define what the marketing world will look like, what products will be, liked and bought, and what brands they love today will be the ones that will succeed. And this is not just a young generation. This is also a generation which has a significant buying power. Today, combined, that generation earns $7 trillion. And in another 8 years from now, by 2030, they will collectively be, having an income of $33 trillion, which will be 27% of the world's income at that point of time. So this is a generation that marketers need to build relationship and understand their way, their language, the way to address and talk to them, and succeed in future. So let me introduce you to that Generation Twitch. Before we do that, let me just start with the session, a quick poll in this room. How many of you think which emoji, the yellow emoji represents, the screen is there. The yellow emoji represents the laughing out, hard, sign language. Can I have a show of hands? How many of you think that's one? Okay, about 5, 8, 10, more hands slowly coming up. People are not sure which side they should be going. Got it? And how many of you think that skull is an appropriate sign for laughing out loud? One, a very strong hand up there. 2, 3. Okay, that's very interesting. The answer is actually both. And it depends on the generation. The boomers, the Gen X, like to express their emotions through a properly typed out text. And the smarter ones started using some of the acronyms, short form THX instead of thanks. The millennials went with a new code where they started using emojis, which they felt were much more easily understandable by everyone. And the new generation likes to use a very completely different code. Why is that important? It is important for marketers and brands because if you do not understand the language in which this new generation is communicating, you run the risk of getting your message completely misinterpreted or coming out with a tonality that's not the one that they like to hear. And that's an example. A mother texting saying your uncle Mark has died and using a skull emoji next to that, thinking that she has expressed her seriousness. And people, her daughter or her son responding saying, I definitely need to teach my mom on what the new quote is. So, it's a small funny anecdote here, but as a brand, as a marketer, if you do not understand their new language, their new ways of expressing themselves, then you're either left behind or worse, run the risk of offending that generation, which has the buying power. And no surprises, brands who tap into these new codes early on and understand them better are the ones who see that growth in their business because they have been able to connect with them in their language and not be seen as talking down with a language that's not understood. So what we did was that was hopefully that example gave you some sense of why we are talking about the codes and languages. What we did was we conducted a global research, a three-part study. First one, we conducted a semiotic review, an agency that specializes in understanding symbols, sign languages, and their implications on culture. We worked with them to identify some of the trends. Then we did a deep dive through some focus groups in few countries to validate that do these symbols, the way we have found out through semiotic study, mean or get interpreted differently by people. And then we decided to conduct a global study, 5 countries in APAC, right from Australia, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Taiwan, to go deeper and understand the implications of this new generation's way of working and way of interacting. And what we looked at was basically focused on 4 pillars. Twitch, as many of you may know, is a live streaming service. Gaming is one of our core content, but we are much more than gaming. There are other places. So naturally, as a business, we wanted to focus on and understand to stay relevant those pillars that matter to us. And that's around live experiences. That's around shared experiences. 95% of content that gets consumed on Twitch is live content. People don't come to Twitch to watch recorded content. So that's how critical it is. Live streaming, of course, a very, very key element because it's the creators, the influencers, as one may say, are the ones who are driving that consumption and that content on our platform. So what is the impact of that? And lastly, gaming. So we looked at these 4 pillars. And what we identified as some of the new trends, I just get confused on where the screen is. It's up there. That how they have changed and emerged with these 5. Number one, in the past, it was for marketers and brands and for consumers, it was all about curated, high quality content produced with high definition and in a studio environment and things like that. However, the newer generation Twitch, as we like to call, is the one who is looking for more authentic content that does not necessarily need to be curated. Second, moving away from fixed to fluid. And what I mean by that is, as a brand, as a marketer, they need to embrace this element that there would be things which will happen in real life and as a brand when they are, when they're communicating with their consumers. As a brand, they may want to make it look perfect, but the newer generation prefers that fluidity over, being a fixed. Thirdly, exclusivity versus inclusivity. So again, over the years, creating exclusive content, getting people to have a priority access has been one of the key things that brands have looked at. But when we spoke to this generation, the generation Twitch, the younger generation, what we found out was they prefer content which is more inclusive, which brings different facets of society, different types of people together, and that's what they value more. And lastly, moving from passive to last one before last, passive to collaborative. They do not expect brands to be creating content which is landed in a finished manner and they don't have a say in that. They prefer those content where they have the opportunity to be becoming part of it and somewhere shaping that story collaborated. And the fifth one, from being disengaged to purposeful. And I'll talk about that when we go into one of the examples. This is a generation that we have seen is so much more conscious about what's happening in the world. In the previous session, when Alice was talking about, you know, pollution and chemicals being one of the driver, we have seen so many examples from this generation that this is a most vocal generation. They like to speak about issues that affect not just them personally, but the society, the earth. And that's what we found out as one of the key trends, that they look for content that's purposeful. So let's dive into each of these five quickly. Curated to authentic. As we have seen over time, influencer marketing and other communication has all been about creating very polished content. And this generation totally understands that that's not the reality. That is all in a way made up, and they don't find it authentic. So where they like to spend time and where they are engaging more is those content where brands are coming out natural, and brands or people who are creating content are willing to show their flaws, their weaknesses. They are not wanting to make everything look perfect. While that we see a lot on our content, which is why in the live space that's important. But it's a very important thing for brands to recognize that that's an acceptable behavior, that's an acceptable thing for newer consumers, and brands can afford to do that. And in the research, we found that 75% of Twitch viewers agree that what's happening on Twitch is authentic, moments of real emotion or drama. And that's because when it's live, our streamers or our creators are very comfortable showing their natural side, their vulnerabilities. When they have a mistake or a faux pas, they don't try to just immediately turn off the camera and go background and make themselves look better. They're very comfortable with that, and that's where they build the bond in relationship. So being authentic, the best practice that we suggest to brands is show your human side, which I've said a few times. Welcome spontaneity and embrace that candor of live streaming. I'll show you an example actually of how that was brought to life, and I hope that audio would.
1, 2, 3.
Repeat this replay. This is.
Where's the phone?
Let's see.
It looks ridiculous. Can you
How
pause?
is it?
1, 2, 3.
I feel like that. Do I have that like ignite?
Yeah, you do.
Ignite?
Because it's not zip.
Oh.
Damn nasty.
I look like a joke. What kind of Ninja Turtle is this? What kind of Ninja
Hey,
Turtle
you
is
need to
this?
wear the shell, yeah.
What the fuck?
Chat says you need to wear the. Hey, where's the phone?
Let's see.
It looks ridiculous.
So, what you saw there looks like a clip, two friends filming together in their home. Other than the logo there, it's probably, not something that looks like a brand piece of work. This was Amazon Prime wanting to do an influencer campaign on Twitch. They approached us. The gentleman in the green is a guy called Sneaky Sushi. He's a very famous variety streamer in Singapore, likes to stream about many things, right, from travel to goofing around, comedy, and many other things. And we partnered with Sneaky Sushi to say that Amazon Prime is going to be running this Prime Day, and we would like you to do some unboxing. Instead of the way unboxing has become polished, something get delivered to them, they open it up, and then everybody has an aha moment and everything looks perfect. Sneaky Sushi wanted to do it differently. What it did was, and it was a little bit nervous for us, but what it did was he sent his crew to order some mystery boxes, and he said, when they bring that, we of course vetted that, making sure that the product wasn't, something that's going to be out of stock and things like that. But when he did that, what he did was, this is a live stream. He opened it, he put on that, green suit, and he speaks about it, and he shows he's uncomfortable somewhere, and the picture that's not coming out is not perfect, and all of that. And there were hundreds and thousands of people watching that stream and interacting with him and seeing that and seeing what offers are there from Amazon Prime on the Prime Day and landing it in an authentic manner. And this kind of example that you're seeing, these can happen when brands are comfortable embracing being authentic, letting the consumers be involved in forming their storyline and not always wanting to push a very polished story. Second one, fixed to fluid. In the past, it has been about creating, content that's polished, put out there, versus now what we are looking at is people who are much more wanting to, have a fluid, be able to influence the storyline, somewhat related to what we saw in the previous example, but a different lens. And when we looked at, our viewers, 72% of those Twitch viewers agreed that interactive tools make advertising more interesting on Twitch. I'm going to show you an example of that in a short while. So the best practice that we recommend to brands is integrate your brand in a way that takes advantage of whatever creative opportunities, tech opportunities that service, that digital experience may offer. And an example of that is that you see on this clip. So Genshin Impact is a hugely popular, fastly growing game, in many parts of the world. And Genshin Impact was launching an update for one of the new update for their game. They have a character called Paimon, and Paimon has been very much loved and one of the favorite character. In this instance, what we did was one of the streamer brought that Paimon character to life out of that game, not just playing the game, letting viewers and consumers interact with that, create character. So what you see in the chat, which is scrolling up pretty fast, is a Paimon special character that people said in that during the game being played that, hey, we would like to have this character being given to us to be used outside the game. And there was a emoticon, so to speak, created and put out there and letting people have that experience. And this could not have happened again had the brand been very cagey or prescriptive about how they would want to be seen, where their character could be used, and all of that stuff. It doesn't mean that you keep brand guidelines on the sideline, but all it means is this new generation appreciates much more when brands are willing to be fluid and let them have a play into the story. Exclusivity through inclusivity. I think I briefly touched upon to it. In the past, it has been about for brands to create content that's available exclusive, and that's how they've tried to drive demand and engagement with consumers, that it's a rare piece, a rare item, or one in hundreds that's available. And that's what has been helping them. This newer generation values inclusivity, and inclusivity of very many facets of that, right from societal inclusivity, representation of different type of communities, and underrepresented sectors and diversity of the society. And when we looked at the research, 78% of Twitch viewers agreed that Twitch is a diverse community for everyone. So our best practice that we recommend is be open to all features that that diverse voices that reflect the diversity found within the Twitch audience or in general the society, and bring them into your messaging and communication, and that's where you will end up being seen as a brand that's more favored. An example of that is when we work with any brand, we do run what one could say influencer marketing, streamer campaigns. We ensure that we bring streamers or partners to brands who are not just from a sector or just the top ones. We ensure that they represent all sectors of society, from gender to sexual diversity and other aspects of it, as well as making sure that we allow streamers who have different interests, not just gaming, to be able to have these kind of opportunities. And that's appreciated by community when they see that diverse set of creators bringing on new products or brand partnerships to them. Passive to collaborative. I think no surprises there. In the past, most of the media has been about one-way communication, and that has evolved over the times with social media, but it has still not given a full collaborative opportunity for people. It has usually in the past, I would say a decade ago, has been restricted to people being able to react to something with a one-way symbol or an emoticon, as we saw, a laughing out loud kind of emoticon, but not being able to have a say into forming that storyline, that product. And this new generation Twitch, is the one that values that much more. And when we looked at the research, 74% of Twitch viewers agree that Twitch interactivity with the interaction on Twitch is everything, and that's why they are there. And I'm going to show you a very good example of that in a moment. Our suggestion to brand, our recommendation to brand is that go beyond those passive observations and encourage participation, from a community. This is actually one of my favorite examples. I'm just going to play on audio once again.
Practically at the moment. Very good. Music, what do you say? Get us in a different vibe, get us back into things. So what's happened so far? Scrooge is practically at the moment. Very good. And back.
Oh, Scrooge. Let's make Scrooge. What's the one that? I think the first one. A Frenchman. That's right.
A Frenchman.
And then a businessman. Make one businessman. If you can remember this, I'll feed it to you if you need. One businessman's going to be the drill sergeant and can't control his voice. And businessman number 2 is going to be like the guy working at the fast food, the teenager.
Okay. This is like different ends of the spectrum. I like it. The music, what do you say? Get us in a different vibe, get us back into things. So what's happened so far? Scrooge.
Sorry, just replay. Let's stop there. This is okay, this is Audible, which you may be familiar with, an audio app, and they wanted to promote themselves over a Christmas time in Australia. And the twist in this was they had a streamer who was going to read that audio book, The Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, online in a stream. But the twist was, it wasn't just a streamer going to read up the book. The viewers that were there had the say in how the book should be read. And in this particular example, somebody in the chat, or some people in the chat, who voted and said it should be read in the tonality of a Karen, and people voted that, and that's how that streamer had to do. And there were many other characters in which that book got read. And that's a good example of a brand being comfortable engaging their consumers and letting them be part of their communication and story. So that's what collaborative. Very quickly going on to the last one, disengaged to purposeful. I think this generation, needless to say, is the one who's the most socially conscious generation. They care a lot more about earth and societal equity and other elements than any of the previous generation, which is a great thing, because where we are today, we need people who are change drivers. The importance of that when it comes to marketing communication is that we want consumers, we want brands to be able to invite engagement through those tools and give them that sense of purpose, not just always talk about promoting your features and demonstrate to them what exactly are you doing. And that has to come as an authentic and a genuine purpose, not a purpose that's there just as a corporate line. And they value that, and they respect that much more. Here's a good example of that. I'm probably not going to turn on the audio, play it very quickly. A streamer in Singapore. She was partnering with us to promote NLB's reading movement in Singapore. And she had a different twist to it. What she did was, while she was doing that, she went and spoke about Overdrive and NLB online features, etc. And then she started referencing certain books she had read and said, hey, that's what I read in that book, and I learned and I apply in my gameplay when she plays online games. And that got community engaged with it. And somebody else came, oh, I read about that element, and I can see how that relates to that. And then she started adding those elements into her gameplay. And this was a good way for her to demonstrate that while she's into gaming, she's also looking at a purpose and delivering that. So hopefully that has given you a good view of how this generation needs to be engaged and communicated with. Just going to recap those 5 superchargers: authentic, fluid, inclusive, collaborative, and purposeful. And all of these play much more strongly on Twitch. The reason being, we are a live streaming service. We are a service where everything that happens is in the moment, and the streamers and the viewers are much more comfortable with it being authentic and have the opportunity of engaging with it in different manners and being part of that storyline. And that's what makes us as an attractive proposition for many brands to be able to deliver those experiences. When we talk of these codes are not just there for the purpose of marketing. It also demonstrates that they have an impact on brand and marketing. 75% of Twitch viewers agree that it means more because it's happening and unfolding right now in the moment. And when we look at the next stat, which is probably more around brand, 74% of Twitch viewers agree that they feel they can experience the emotion along with the streamers. When they say they can experience the emotion, if there's a brand in that, their association, their positive memories about that particular campaign, that brand, are naturally much higher than what they would have been otherwise. And we see on a scale here, compared to some of the other competitors, Twitch viewers are more likely to feel excited, amused, or involved in that sense when they are on the service. The impact of that on brands: Twitch is a place for everyone. 66% agree that any brand can advertise on Twitch, and 60% agree that they prefer to use or buy a brand that they see being promoted or spoken about by a Twitch streamer. And that's not only because there is lots of advertising dollars being put, it's because the way it is being done is very differently than other places. I'm just going to quickly skip, looking at my clock at the back end. I've got 2 minutes to go. So brands that work with Twitch streamers can drive, number one, very strong affinity. And that we see in this stat. 73% agree that advertising is more important because it supports creators. Now, this is an interesting one. You may look at that stat in isolation and it may not make sense, but this is a generation that totally understands that advertising is what funds a lot of content. When they are on internet, it is not for free, it is being ad funded. And Twitch is one of those places, or live content is one of those places where they completely embrace that. In fact, they feel positive that it is helping those content creators, those streamers, to earn a living while also at the same time entertaining. And therefore, they're more receptive to brands being in those environments. So no surprises, the best performing partnerships happen when brands are willing to align more onto the right side versus the left side. And that's where the future with this generation is when it comes to communication. And if I just wrap up in my last 30 seconds, 3 key takeaways I would suggest is, number one, as a brand, lead tapping into these cultures and don't follow. Don't wait for them to become mass media, where every other brand is doing it and then you get onto it. You run the risk of, not capturing the heart and mind share. Number one, thrive in 5, those 5 codes. Remember, authentic, fluid, inclusive, collaborative, and purposeful. And lastly, Generation Twitch. Generation Twitch is that generation which has a buying power today, and it is going to be much bigger. They are the biggest cohort. They are the change drivers. Find your strategies to be able to engage with them in the language that they speak. Use the skulls, not the funny emojis. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sunil.